Please be seated. Again, it's such wonderful news to hear about calling your new priest. And I have to tell you, I wish he was here already so that I didn't have to deal with these readings this morning. However, I'm doing him that favor. So you may remember back, I think it was in September, this past September, there was a brief kerfluffle caused by a few folks who were convinced that Jesus was returning. I think it was like September 23rd. I have to admit, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention. Yeah, I had a seminary professor who would reply to all dubious claims, important if true. And that kind of falls under that heading, important if true. Because there have been so many claims about the return of Jesus. I brought with me a little book I got in the mail. The title is 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Could Be in 1988. I was in Nashville then. This was mailed to all the churches in Nashville. And I got to tell you, there were people who sold their houses, quit their jobs, went and sat out on a hilltop. It was supposed to be sometime September 11 to 13, 1988. They all felt bad on September 14th, I can tell you that. But you see, people of faith have always been wondering about the return of Jesus. Ever since the disciples themselves. That's what we heard in the gospel this morning. Teacher, when will this be? What will be the signs that this is taking place? And folks continue to ask and look for signs. And what's amazing to me is that very few of them ever consider Jesus' own answer to that question. Many will come in my name and say, I am he, and the time is near. Do not go after them. And that reply, you see, suggests to me that we've been asking the wrong question all along. The question is not, when will Jesus return? The question is, why would we ever think he left us in the first place? At the heart of all our readings today isn't a concern for some future day of destruction, of restoration, of retribution. But there is a concern for the life of the community of faith right here and right now. Now, Episcopalians aren't widely known for their familiarity with the Bible. But we all know this, don't we? Jesus said, whenever two or three are gathered together, where is he? In the midst of them. Why do we think he ever left us? He is with us in the life of this community, right here, right now. See, that community is the only thing that mattered to Malachi. He's speaking to a community of people who has lost their faith. They no longer know how to make sense in a world where The wicked pursue selfish ends with apparent impunity. And Malachi's vision answers the fears and anxieties of those people that asks, where is the God of justice? With the firm response that the fires of God's justice still burn to destruction for those who prey upon the faithful, and burn with warmth and light for those who hold on. That community is the only thing that mattered to Paul. 1st and 2nd Thessalonians are the earliest writings in the Old Testament, around the year 50, when Paul wrote them. All Christians, including Paul himself, were fully expecting that Jesus would be returning at any moment. And so, as we heard, some of them thought they could just sit around and wait and watch. And hence Paul's admonition, if anyone will not work, let him not eat. In other words, the world may be ending soon, but the work of building up the community of faith must never cease. And the failure to join in that work is just as bad as actively working against the church. The building up and preserving of the community of faith is the only thing that ever mattered. You know, by the time Luke wrote the words we heard this morning, they weren't prophecy anymore. They were history. His community had already lived through the siege of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. Arrests and persecutions of Christians had already begun to take place. And so the gospel message is reinforced. God is at work in the midst of God's people, in the heart of the community gathered in God's name. And there alone is found the strength and confidence to meet the terrors of today. But now for us, Jerusalem and the temple, the first Christians and the persecutions they faced, all that is ancient history, long, long ago. But the gospel truth remains. Any congregation, including this one, any group gathered to worship and pray, will always include people whose worlds have been shattered, whose hopes have been trampled. Some of them might be old enough to have learned to lift up their heads and look for the promised resurrection even in the midst of the triumph of death. But others will need to be supported while they try just to draw another breath. You know who they are. They are your neighbors, your brothers and sisters. And the gospel truth still stands. so that the gospel work must carry on. This will be a time for you to bear witness, Jesus said. Here and now, our work is to point the way to God for others. You see, it's not a question of whether we will be such witnesses or not. We are witnesses for Jesus Christ. The question is whether we will be good witnesses. That is what matters. That is the present work we are engaged in, so that we might reach the future we dream of. It's about the most precious gift God has given us, the gift of seeing and serving God's Son in each other and in the people we meet every day. It's about supporting the weak and rejoicing with the strong and doing right by those who suffer injustice. It's not about what's going to happen tomorrow. It's about the only way that has ever been found to get through today with your soul and dignity intact. It's about the people who love you and the God who calls us together. Amen.